Good afternoon F11 members, and welcome to the Fundamentals of Post-Production video tutorials for issue 28, May 2014. In front of me now, open in Lightroom, I have a shoot from Iceland, Reynisfjara beach, with huge waves pounding onto the beach. Very dramatic situation, being blown off the cliff top, high winds, but lots of potential, I think. The lighting is quite difficult. I'm shooting straight into the light here for most of these images that you can see, but I've chosen one image here that I think has potential because of the drama of the location, those wonderful waves, and these birds. Up here I've got a flock of gulls, or possibly geese, or maybe even swan, I don't know. And here, this gull here, flying low over the waves, all delivering up a touch of je ne sais quoi to lift the picture. But the picture as is flat, low contrast, and washed out. And what I need is to introduce some bottle. Looking at the picture, there is no colour interest at all to it. So I'm going to experiment with converting it to black and white. And just jumping ahead to the end product, here it is. And I think you can see that the potential is there. And I'm really quite pleased with that picture. So now we're going to work through showing you how we got from there, from the start point to there. So let's go back into Lightroom, and the first thing I do when I'm looking at a picture and intending to convert it in black and white is just move my cursor on the left here down the presets that Lightroom has built in for black and white conversions. All these different ones here. Now, I very rarely use these presets, but they do serve as very useful ways of envisaging what could possibly be done to the picture in terms of black and white and what it needs. And of all these presets here, I think possibly that one, Look 2, is the most promising. I could of course just click on that, but I'm not going to. Look 3 looks good as well. Clearly we need more contrast, but I'm going to do it all manually because that way we have the most control. Now, many of you may like using specialist black and white conversion software such as Silver Effects, each to their own, but let's just consider using what we've got without having to spend out on other bits and pieces. And at the end of the day, whatever you're using, a forethought and knowledge of what is possible in black and white conversions is crucial. So the first thing I do is come along to this image and click on black and white. There, it's made it into a black and white picture, but really that's just the start. We need to really introduce some punch to this picture. But before I do that, I just want to correct the horizon, which you can see here is not quite level. Not really surprising considering the buffeting I was getting from the wind in that location, but here we go, just using down here in lens corrections manual, and then I use the rotate command to just straighten that image. And now I come back up, I'm going to crop the image here, this crop tool here. I leave this lock here unlocked so that I'm not constrained by the aspect ratio, and I'm just going to make it a bit more of a letterbox image. So I'm going to, that bottom bit of the image doesn't really add anything to the composition, so I'm going to crop that off. I'm going to bring it in a touch to get rid of the white bits that we introduced when I rotated the image, and just make it a bit of a tighter composition. I try not to crop images. I try to compose using the full area of the viewfinder, but when things are happening quickly, and in particular when Mother Nature in the form of high winds is banging me about, a little bit of cropping is not the worst crime on the face of the planet. So I'm going to click done there, Now the next thing I need to do is start introducing some bottle and contrast to the picture. What I'm going to do is create 3 different black and white conversions from this image. One for the darkest area of the image, one for the midtones, and one for the brightest areas of the image. And then I'm going to merge them together later in Photoshop using layers. So let's just start logically working through it all. And I'm now, to start with, I'm looking at the darker part of the image. So that's going to be this bottom section and the sort of bottom left portion of the image area. First thing I do, as always, is look at my black and here's my histogram, and I'm going to look at my black and my white points. First thing to do is adjust that black point, bring it way over, and immediately it starts to improve the impact of the picture. Next thing, white point. Now, as is at the moment, the brightest part of the picture up here is where the sun is backlighting the image. If I move the white points any further over to the right, I pretty soon start clipping. But actually I'm not really concerned with that at the moment, because I'm just making a conversion for this portion of the image here, this area bottom left. So I can afford to clip bits top right. So just by holding down Alt and moving whites to the right, I see how far I can go before I start clipping whites in the portion of the area that I'm concerned with, and that is to the left. And I can go all the way over there, really, without clipping any whites. So that's what I'm going to do. And can you see, ignore this portion, but look over here, how already that's improved the look of the image, the tonal range, the impact. Look at how those whites are standing out. Okay, now I want to come to the tone curve down here and add a bit of contrast, or in fact quite a bit of contrast really. I find when I'm doing black and white, my adjustments tend to be much more pronounced than with color. So I'm going to use Lightroom's preset medium contrast for the tone curve, and there again it's added yet more bottle to that area. It's starting to work. Now clarity is a slider that I think is very, very dangerous to use, particularly in color, but I will say it is a more useful tool in black and white. And I feel if I just give this image a bit of clarity, you can see how it affects the impact, the bottle, the local contrast in this area down here. So I'm going to give round about +20 on the clarity slider here, and I'd say that lifts this area quite well. And at this point now I'm going to adjust my sharpening, of course. As always, I'm going to use Lightroom's preset as my starting point, the scenic preset there over here. And now by holding down Alt and sliding the masking key to the right, I'm going to adjust my mask. So really I want the mask just to affect the area where the sky is, because virtually everywhere else there's detail. So there you go, masking 14. And at this point I'm ready to export that picture, the first of these frames now. So I'm going to go Library, Export, and it's asking me where I want to put it in specific folders. Processed subfolder Iceland. I'm going to rename it to Ice, keeping its folder original file name there. It's going to be a TIFF ProPhoto RGB color space with 16-bit color channel there. I'm going to resize, and not going to resize it, resolution 300 dpi, no sharpening because we've already done that, no watermark, do nothing. So let's just export that, and come back to the image. Next thing I want to do is now look at the area for the midtones in the picture. So now it's just a bit it's nice tones and impact down in this portion of the image, but the top half of the image is just too bright. So I'm going to select linear on the point curve and then just drag the curve down here until I get the kind of density I want to the waves looking at this middle area of the image. Now that's really brought out the impact of that bird there against the white there. This wave here is really starting to be a dominant feature in the image there, and you can see up here these birds flying against the dark shadow of the cliff behind are a powerful element in the picture. So with that, I'm now just going to export that. And I go export. All my settings are the same, so I can just click on that and do that quickly and come back to the develop module. Now at this point, what I want to do is actually darken down the top third of the picture so that I've got a little bit of tone detail here in the sky. I'm shooting straight into the light, so really there's no detail to be had there, but I would like a touch of tone. Bright white corners to the image, generally speaking, make me very, very uneasy. I could just use a grad filter or darken down that portion of the image, but by doing that I must be careful not to lose the impact of these birds here against that mid-tone grey of the cliff behind them. Darken that area of the image down too much and they will be lost. So I'm now going to use the grad tool here and just put a bit of a grad in, something like this. Now I'm going to have to be pretty subtle, because if I go too far I'll start losing those birds there against the cliff. Can you see what I mean? If I go that far, which is clearly way too far unless you're a producer on Top Gear, you can't see the birds against the cliff at all. So it's a balancing act here, and I'm going to come back to about there, just giving me a hint of tone in the sky up top right, but I've not lost the birds. Click on done, and that's going to be my final export. So now I'm going to open up the pictures in Photoshop. No I'm not, because I'm not quite finished. One more thing to do, and I'm just concerned, you remember I clipped my whites here at the beginning, and you can see if I hover my cursor over that top right arrow of the histogram, you will see on the right there those red bits showing me where I'm clipping highlight information. So I need to deal with that, and I'm going to make now a conversion coming back on my white clipping all the way back there until I can see most of those whites coming back to me, and dialing in a bit of highlight reduction until you can see I stop clipping up here. Now that's giving me a very dull image there, but at this stage I'm not worried about that. It's these highlights that I'm going to be dealing with. I'm going to make yet another raw of that particular conversion to be merged with the other three. Now I can experiment in part 2 of the fundamentals of post-production video tutorials, of putting them all together in Photoshop. See you there.